so I hope you still have that coffee in your hand. I know I do. We're going to talk today about the console class, and the console class allows us to display information to the user. We also can get information from the user. Before we get started here, let's take a look at the documentation provided by Microsoft. So as you can see here, we're at the console class. And if we look at the inheritance hierarchy, we also have, we have the console class, and it inherits from system.object. Pretty much every object that is able to be what we call instantiated, or you take the blueprints from the class and you build an object, it inherits from the object class. If we come into here into the object class, the console also has all of these methods. Now a method is simply something that that object can do. Like a phone. A phone has a method to ring. And it also has properties like the size of the hard drive. So we can come through here and take a look at all the properties that we can either get values from or set values. And so for instance, we could get the current background color on our console, or we could set it, as well as the title for the display. And then we have several methods like beep and clear and read key, read line. We'll use read line in order to get input from the user, and read key in order to pause the program until the user presses a key to continue. And then we also have write, and you can see there are several of these methods for write, and that's because it's overloaded. And method overloading is a way to create the same keyword for an action and then pass in different data types, and then to let the system try to figure out which one to implement. Because as you can imagine, if you passed in an integer, you might want something different to happen as if you passed in a string. And then we have write line, and write line we'll use a lot. Now the difference between write and write line adds a carriage return, or if you just hit the enter key, it would go to a new line. And that's what a write line does. It writes a new line and then it goes to the next line. Where write just adds information as if you're doing text wrapping, and it'll just continue to go from left to right across the screen until that line completely fills up, and then it will naturally break according to the window settings that you have. So let's go back here. So as you can see here, I am clearing out my console because I get this generated error because I'm running Windows in a virtual machine. So let's take a look at the console background color. If I uncomment this out and run, you can see that the background color for the text changed on that line. Now let's add a console clear program, and let's run that. Now we have a different output, and so that's because the black was printed out first, and I had to override that output by clearing the screen. Now let's change the text color, and now we have red text. Some would say it might be written in blood. Okay, and then we can also change the title for the window itself. And as we can see here, the console class markcfilter.com. Now the default would have looked like this. That's really long and boring and really non-descriptive. Now let's take a look. We'll go back to the standard colors. And now let's make our console beep a little bit. There it was. Wow. We could actually make some games using that beep noise. We can use the read key in order to pause the program. And in fact, I will swap these so that we can actually see it in operation. And there I had to hit the key one time in order for it to go to prompt at the very bottom, which is right here. Now let's take a look at the write line, and we will couple that with a Console.Write. And here's the write line, and here is the Console.Write. As you can see, the write line automatically created a carriage return, as if the user hit the return key and then started a new line. So now if we comment out the Console.Write line and then uncomment all of the Console.Write, now let's take a look and see what happens. And now everything is on one line. Now we can take an input from the user, then we can output that input. If we click on this, we can see that they're connected. And we'll get our beep. And at that moment in time, I didn't put anything in. And so we'll talk about validation. But as you saw there was really nothing that said, hey, buddy, I want some information from you. So why don't we do that? So we can take this write line and modify it. And in fact, one common use for the Console.Write is for gathering user input and to keep the cursor on the same line as the question. So I will add a new line, and I'll even add a tab so it's pushed over to the right a little bit. And now we'll run it. And now we'll enter something. I'll say Mark. And the output is Mark. And we could use this output in our program as we get closer to loops and conditionals. Then we'll talk about that. But there are a few other things that we can do. In fact, let me rerun this, and I'll add a lot of spaces to it. As you see here, it kept the spaces. And if we could actually see that there's space characters there as well from the spaces that I had input there. Now there's a way to deal with that, and that's called the trim method. And it just trims it. It's only going to trim the white space or the empty space to the left and right of the first and last actual character in the input. So I'll show you what I mean. As you can see here, the space was trimmed off as well, which you can't see, but the space was trimmed off of here as well. And we could actually show that, so why don't we do that? Because I'm a huge fan of clarity. So as you can see here, the extra space was trimmed off at the beginning as well as the end. Now there's some other things that we can do as well. We can force everything to be lowercase, and we can force things to be uppercase. So the toLower method forces all the characters to go to lowercase. And likewise, toUpper does the reverse. So that's great. Who cares, right? Well, there's some cool things that you can do with all of these, and I'm going to show that to you right now. Now here's a menu, and we're presenting to the user a selection of colors that correspond to the background color options that the .NET framework provides. And this is for a loading bar. Again, by changing the background color and then clearing the screen and changing the background color back, you can create some pretty cool effects. So for this demonstration, let's do a green loading bar. And there, my friends, is the console.